Welcome to another edition of Talk at 10, the local affairs program here on KRTS, Marfa Public Radio. I'm Tom Michael, your host for this episode. We're midway through February 2008, and the weather is surprisingly good enough perhaps to get on your bicycle and bike across the country. I'd like to welcome to the studio Mike Tryon and Jeff Hyland. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike and Jeff are here in the studio. They are biking from west to east across the United States. Is it hard to get back in the saddle every morning?
Yes.
I'd say not in the morning. I would say probably early afternoon. That's when the saddle is not so friendly.
How about camping along the road? Has Johnny Law been friendly about that?
Very friendly.
Very friendly.
Drivers? Cars?
Drivers pretty friendly.
It's tough to interpret their honk. It's because it's that monotone so you don't know exactly what they're trying to say. People obviously are supportive, and some people, kind of getting a little close to us.
It's hard to communicate in a 75 mile per hour blur.
Exactly.
Well, final question. What do you see at 12 miles per hour that you don't see at 75?
I see a lot of roadkill. Looks like scraps of earmuffs and dog food, canned dog food.
Yeah.
And I don't think you see that in a car.
There's a lot of reasons why to do a bike ride like this, but probably the most personal reason is cancer. I'm going to take a bet that you, the viewer, you know someone with cancer. At this point, I think we all do. What is different is our proximity to people battling cancer. For me, I have two people that are pretty close to me that have been struggling with cancer. My dad and my brother's girlfriend, Megan. My dad was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2001. He's now cancer-free, but he's going through a second bone marrow transplant in November of 2010. Megan was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which had metastasized into her lymph nodes in 2006 at age 24. When this bike ride started in January of 2008, Megan was there to support us at the send-off to our crazy journey. At the end of July 2009, Megan's battle with cancer had ended. Many people have a predisposition to cancer that exists from birth in their DNA. The crazy thing about cancer is that the triggers for action come from the person's environmental surroundings. I should clarify that there is no evidence that Megan's cancer or my dad's was caused by something in the environment around them. But the truth is, in many areas, cancer rates are at an all-time high. Clearly, too many businesses and people think that it's okay to trash the planet. This fine mixture of greed and ignorance has to stop, especially when it affects the health of people. All this cancer around me started to make me wonder what I could do to help. As a media producer, I have no idea how to fight cancer in a laboratory. But maybe there's a way to connect more people to the environment, where they would be inclined to ask themselves, is the water I drink clean? What about the air I breathe? Are there toxic chemicals in the food I eat? Since these areas are often the source for so many human health-related concerns, I decided that I needed to make a documentary that helps connect people to big-picture environmental topics with the hopes that they might see the Earth around them in a little different light. All of that, of course, taking place on a cross-country bicycle ride through the southern tier of the United States. And while I'm on this ride, I'm going to ask the people I meet about their perspectives on the environment. You know, like in the middle of Texas, wouldn't it be great to see what a cowboy has to say about connecting his lifestyle with the earth?
My name is Joel Nelson, and I've been a resident of the Big Bend region since 1975. My whole lifetime practically has been spent on cattle ranches in the West. And I love being horseback, and I cherish that tradition. And I've often said that I chose a lower standard of living in order to obtain a higher quality of life, and that's how I look at it. Because the standard of living in this kind of work is not even poverty level sometimes, and what you get back from it though makes you rich. Yeah.
My friend Mike, who helped create the idea for this project, has agreed to help me film this journey as well as participate in it. The two of us are about a week and a half into the state of Texas, and we follow a path along the edge of the Big Bend National Park. Something we haven't had to deal with too badly on this trip is sickness. We've had runny noses and slight coughs, but nothing that was stopping us from riding until now.
So we're about to arrive in Marathon and head out to Eve. And there's a train. Again.
Mike has come down with a major cold. He needs to take a few days off, get some rest, and some healthy food. A couple of cowboys told us about this place, Eve's Garden. It's an organic garden and bed and breakfast in Marathon, Texas.
With the idea that we don't have to keep doing things exactly the way we've always done them.
Most people think they can't make a difference, and we're here to say, yes, you can.
We named it Eve's Garden because we found a beautiful statue of Eve, and the concept of backing up a little bit and starting over, especially with food, appealed to us, so that was the perfect name for it.
So we built our bed and breakfast in a way that the rooms surround a production greenhouse. That way we can exchange heat and energy, sunlight, climate control, and of course eating the food that comes from the garden.
My greenhouse is probably 1/2 flowers and probably half vegetables. We try to serve people food from our garden as much as we can.
How about we return to the organic system and get rid of the pollutant elements?
People want to know what organic is and why. Why does it matter? Why do we want to pay more for organic food?
At Eve's Garden, it all started to make sense to me. I realized that we pay more for organic food because it demands that we play by the rules of Mother Nature. The reality of life is that it's a competition among living things to embrace energy. When organic food is produced, humans have to compete with the insects and the birds for that same energy. If pesticides can kill bugs all the way dead, then they might be killing us a little bit every day. Inorganic pesticides can include mercury, copper sulfate, lead, and arsenic, all of which are known to cause cancer. And it freaked me out to learn from Kate that these inorganic pesticides are a byproduct of the petroleum industry.
When you use petroleum products and chemical fertilizers on soil, you kill all the soil bacteria. And so the soil is essentially dead. You're totally then dependent on using more fertilizer. And the only way to bring it back is to stop using the chemicals and begin to put composted materials and microorganisms back in the soil. And once you've done that, you can clean the soil up. You can, what they call, bioremediate the soil and get rid of the toxins that are in it. And then you can grow decent food from it.
Repeatedly, all over the world, people misuse pesticides, and it has a negative effect on groundwater supplies and the health of people.
I've had people call me on the phone and say, well, I want to come there, but my husband won't eat, or he's afraid of organic food. And I said, well, what do you mean he's afraid of organic food? Oh, he's afraid there'll be bugs in it. You know? And I don't know why they're not afraid of the food they're eating.
How deadly the long-term effects of low-level exposure to toxic pesticides is still relatively unknown. But evidence continues to mount, showing a clearer correlation between pesticide exposure and the development of cancer in people.
This is kind of crazy being here because last time you went through this, I was on the bike ride.
Yes.
You know, you getting cancer, and we're talking about Megan getting cancer, and, you know, there's a potential that Megan's was genetic. There's a large chance with yours that it was something triggered in the environment. Is that correct?
My best bet would be that it's something in the environment that I've been exposed to, the air, the things I've eaten, things I've had to drink. I can't tell you what it is. but with the numbers of people with cancer today compared to 100 years ago, I think it's related to our modern industrial world and all the wonderful things we've created that at the same time are probably causing harm to us.
Mm-hmm. You've lived a pretty healthy life, Dad. You never smoked a cigarette.
Never.
Never smoked pot.
Never.
You drank a little bit.
On occasion.
A little bit. I thought this was an honest documentary.
When I was originally diagnosed, the doc said, tell your kids this is not hereditary. So don't, you and Mike don't worry about getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff, you've been here today for the first time, City of Hope, Duarte, California. It's a wonderful facility, but when you walk through these halls and you recognize that all these people are dealing with cancer, this is more than something genetic. There's something going on, and so many people are dealing with this. And little kids who haven't been exposed, I don't know how you explain a little kid at 3 and 4 years old that hasn't been on Earth long enough to be exposed to, pollutants and poisons. And I don't know the answer, but the numbers are way out of whack.
The connection more people are starting to make is that fruits and vegetables become good for you when they have trace nutrients that only nature can create. Nutrient-rich fruits and veggies become that way because of the presence of other life around the food.
I always tell people, if they're buying from someone local, to go and look for spiders in the garden because they're one of the most sensitive things. And if there are no spiders, they're using some poisons.
Kind of sounds like that thing called the circle of life to me. Based on the idea that you're alive, wouldn't you want the circle of life occurring in and around the produce that you eat? The pesticide industry exists to kill unwanted insects and unwanted fungus. Now, to be fair, the use of pesticides will greatly increase the yield of the entire crop for a farmer. While the farmer has more physical objects to sell, the nutrients contained in the crop are fractional at best when compared to an organic version of the same.
But USDA will tell you right now that our vegetables have 10% of the nutrient value they should have.
If we have any hope of rebuilding small town America, we're going to have to develop a localized food production system. We're going to have to grow food in our own backyards, in our own towns, with our own people. 30% of the population will have to go back into agriculture. There's a million questions. It always comes back to the village. We have to rebuild the village.
This morning, Mike and I left Brownsville, Texas. I'm still really struggling with the decision that I just made. In Del Rio, I started to feel sick with the same bug that Mike had back in Marathon. And while Mike was sick in Marathon, I made some phone calls to some scientists local to the coast of Louisiana to be interviewed for our documentary. Based on our strange approach to making this documentary, some incredible scientists have said that they would sit down to talk to us about environmental issues fast at work in coastal Louisiana. The reason they're all available that week is because it's spring break, so we have to be here by the third week in March to get these interviews. And in Del Rio, it's February 22nd. I'm going to lose too many days off the road. I can tell this cold is gonna be a butt kicker. So we took the bull by the horns and totally cheated by driving from Del Rio to Brownsville. I knew we would still have to cover 50 to 100 miles per day to make it to Louisiana, so Mike and I gave it a huge push on our first day back in the saddle. 76 miles in one day. That puts us in Armstrong, Texas. Funny story about Armstrong, Texas. There's not much around here except maybe 20 people and ranch land after ranch land for 40 miles. Well, unbeknownst to us, this land holds some special history. This small place on the map, fair to say, the middle of nowhere. How the hell did we pull off here at the end of the day? Well, do you remember Dick Cheney? Vice President Dick Cheney? What are the odds that at this seemingly random spot on the side of the road happens to be where Dick Cheney shot his campaign contributor in the face? When we asked a ranch hand if we could set up camp tucked away from the noise of the road, we got denied because this place doesn't want any more bad publicity. So tonight we'll crash here off Highway 77 and next to the megastructure that is the Armstrong Post Office to hopefully keep the roar of the road down to a minimum.
I go to the post office and I get 2 handfuls of mail a couple of times a week. 80% of it goes in the trash can there on the post office floor, which is usually overflowing with other people's junk mail, throwaway. There's no reason for all of that. It's just, it's offensive and it's obscene.
Thursday, February 28th, 2008. When we left the land of VPDC, we managed to make it about 60 miles further. Today, the 30 to 40 mile per hour tailwind made the first part of the day a lot of fun.
What's all that gasoline for? Well, we got bicycles!
But later on, the road changed direction, and then we were fighting the same wind that only moments ago was helping us cruise with the trailers at 20 miles per hour at some points. We ended the day in Robstown, about 20 miles outside of Corpus Christi. Did you know the name Corpus Christi? It's Latin for the body of Christ. Now, I'm not going to get all Da Vinci on you here, but Corpus Christi is one of Texas's biggest cities that pumps industry, oil refinement, and it's a port city. It kind of seems perfect to bring up the first of a few religious segments upon our arrival to Corpus Christi. Most religions have a creator or God that has created this planet as a gift for its people. I'm intrigued to know if people of different faiths recognize this. Are they passionate about protecting the planet and preserving it for future generations?
What role do you think religion plays in participating in the cleanup of the planet?
What does your religion have to do with it?
Yeah, does it have anything to do with it?
I don't know. Not in my view, does it?
I wish I knew. I'm not a very deeply religious person, but it almost seems to me there's almost needs to be some kind of spiritual movement.
We're churchgoers, we're Catholic, but I haven't seen any grassroots programs going from a religious standpoint.
I can only speak on my personal relationship. Is cleanliness is next to godliness. So therefore, a clean planet is close to a godly planet. And that's one of the basic concepts of Christianity that I was taught as a child.
I don't necessarily have a strong opinion one way or another based on my religion. My opinions about the environment and the earth, I can't say there's zero impact from my religion.
With the Pope's new message and the concern of the environment, the focus of our school next year is going to be our environment.
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. Religion has nothing to do with keeping the planet clean. The world would be a better place if there was no religion.
I don't know how you can separate spirituality or religion and stewardship of the land. They just go hand in hand.
Corpus Christi is the city we've chosen to begin to ask religious leaders some questions about environmental connections that can be made with different religions. From Corpus Christi to Baton Rouge, here's a spread of different environmental Christian perspectives we collected on the ride. Later on, we'll meet with Wiccans, Muslims, and the Jewish faith. Right now, though, here you go, Christians.
It's Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15, where it says the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and care for it. And the Lord God commanded the man, you're free to eat, and so on. But it's that text where he says, you know, put him in the garden and he told him to take care of it.
And then he said this one, I brought you into a fertile land to eat its fruit and rich produce, but you came in and defiled my land, and you made my inheritance detestable.
The Bible says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein.
Oh, God. I'm not prepared to quote any scripture to you at this point, but yes, there are passages, and the church itself teaches that you know, we are stewards of creation in all aspects, not only in terms of our, you know, our gifts of time, talent, our material resources, and of course, really it all ties in with the love of neighbor and the treatment of neighbor, respect and what have you, because everything has a consequence, both good and bad actions. So consequent of bad actions not only happens in our own personal dimension of our own lives, but anytime we make bad decisions and bad choices, whether it be on the material or the spiritual levels, there's always a consequence.
What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be a steward. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in so much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous in much. You cannot serve both God and mammon.
Wow. Okay.
We do have that responsibility to take care of what God has given to us as far as the earth is concerned. And the earth will be here until Jesus comes again. But it seems to me that common sense would say, if you contaminate the water you drink, you're going to destroy yourself. If you contaminate the earth, the ground that produces your crops, some of that substance could come back to your body. And the same for the air. There's only those three elements, land, water, and air.
We've talked to some people on our road and on our journey where we were just a little thrown by it, by the response of saying, well, if we are polluting the world so bad, and if there is possibly the threat of a big chunk of human beings to die off, wherever that be on the planet, who knows. Mm-hmm. But if that is to happen, and if that is the case, that's God's will. And that, I don't know, is there truth in that?
Not in terms of our Catholic teaching. God doesn't force anything upon us. I mean, ultimately this world will end. But it's not like, it's like people saying, well, you know, when somebody dies tragically, one thing I have a problem with, and that definitely is not church teaching, they'll say, well, it was their time. And like we're predestined. We don't believe in predestination as Catholics. That, you know, in other words, if I choose to step out in front of an oncoming truck, naturally, chances are I'm going to die, but that's not because God wanted me to step in front of a truck. I made a bad decision. People tend to think of, you know, happening to somebody else and a chunk of the world rather than the whole world. I think if it ever comes to that, the problem is it's not going to be a chunk of the world. It will be the whole world.
A lot of times we want to blame God for what mistakes we're making, and I think we have a great part in how this thing is going to play out.
God doesn't, you know, make the choices for us. We make our own choices. That's what's called free will, and there are consequences to those choices. And God just affirms us in our choices. He's not the one to bring about the consequences. Like in terms of salvation, and we teach in the church, really it's not God sitting there waiting to damn us, because otherwise what's the point? If we're already damned, why bother? That's not the teaching. God's not sitting there waiting, you know, to just, you know, we've got a time bomb on all of us and going to blow up. It's dependent upon us. So we reap what we sow.
I don't really go to church, but just based on the small Christian perspective that we've captured from Corpus Christi to Baton Rouge, it appears to me that if Christianity needed a reason to start having sermons on the environment, especially living on a planet that is increasingly more and more toxic for each succeeding generation, the teachings are definitely in the Bible.
know something beautiful that catches your eye, while there are things all around you, things haunting you inside. I think that this is the time to take the chance and move on. Just forget all the things and people that might be pressuring you. Just focus in and go all the way, and what a chance it is to take. My whole life's at stake in this final dive. You serve as my last goodbye. I figured everything out, so now I'm leaving today. I'm taking this tidal wave into the afterlife and into the grave. Whoa, don't think that...
We've realized there's a 17-mile-per-hour wind pushing us north the entire route today. We've set a goal to cover 100 miles in one day. If we do it, we'll end up in Bay City, Texas. Here goes! Texas has been a massive state to cross. We've had some amazing days and seen some incredible countryside.
Another day on the road, baby.
Mike and I have always been fascinated by the Gulf of Mexico and never had a chance to explore it until now. In El Paso, we learned about air quality, and not too far from there, we were disgusted by the poo-poo choo-choo. We finished up Texas by riding through a rainy Houston at what had to be the most sexually charged room you've ever seen in your life. Only $59 a night at the Palace of Porno.
So we made it. We're here at, it's called Turtle Bayou. And we spent the night along the bayou last night. And didn't get eaten by an alligator, which is pretty good. We're off to head to Orange, Texas, that is. And from there, we'll be in Louisiana. We're going to be done with Texas. It has been 3.5 long weeks through this state, and it was a good time. We met really great people, but it's time to say goodbye to Texas. We're done messing with it.
Welcome to Louisiana. This is gonna be fun. Louisiana is home to some of the most unique land and habitat type anywhere on the planet. Moments into crossing the border, we were seeing frogs, lizards, snakes, crazy birds, and of course, some of Louisiana's finest, the alligators. This place is teeming with life. Back in 2008, when Mike and I rode our bicycles through Louisiana, we intended to document a group of perspectives that encapsulated the complex realities of dealing with public safety in coastal Louisiana. The reason? Because many threats to public safety in Louisiana are environmentally based, and in March of 2008, it was just 3.5 years after the devastation of Hurricane Katrina and Rita.
I was born in Texas, but I was raised in New Orleans. And when I first went back to New Orleans and saw the devastation, you can't even imagine what it was, what the devastation was. The home I grew up with I don't live there anymore, neither did my family. That whole area in Lakeview was just underwater, totally gone.
Two environmental topics that threaten public safety in coastal Louisiana are erosion and the dead zone. Now hunker down, y'all. This stuff's important. To help us find our way through this crazy topic of erosion are Dr. Roy Daca and Dr. Sherwood Gagliano. Both of these geologists have years of experience with a focus on why land sinks in Louisiana.
What you want when you're dealing with public safety
you really can't be messing around trying to look at averages and things like that. What you need to look at is how bad can it be?
Unfolding at land loss rates in the 20 to 25 square mile per year range.
People have known that we've been losing the wetlands for decades. The question is, what do we do?
Coastal wetland loss in Louisiana is huge, and it's a real problem both to the natural resources and the human beings that live there and the culture of South Louisiana as well.
Dr. Daca runs the Louisiana Spatial Reference Program at Louisiana State University. His job is to track how Louisiana moves.
This is the GPS antenna. You can see the different colors on the map, and the colors are basically telling you something about what the elevation is. And to give you an idea, the areas that are in blue, these lighter blue colors are the highest areas. The lowest areas are these areas in magenta. So you can get an idea as if you follow my finger, I'm low and I'm getting higher, and finally I reach the highest point here. The other thing to point out is around here you can see levees that have been built to protect the people living inside of this area here. This is the marsh. Out in here, it's at an elevation of roughly 1 foot above sea level.
Dr. Daca helped me discover the causes for sinking: levees and subsidence. Imagine this as a typical portion of the Mississippi River. The flow of water in the Mississippi changes with the arrival of rainy season.
The river has this habit of shifting its course about every 1,000 years.
To block the river's capability to flood, the Army Corps of Engineers built levees. Because they're in place, the river can't replenish the hydrology of the land. This causes the moisture-rich land to sink. This sediment in the water here should be going there. It's not. The second reason the coast of Louisiana sinks is because of subsidence, when water or oil is removed below the surface of land and the surface sinks as a result. It's called subsidence. Much of coastal Louisiana is made up of soft soil, wetlands, and waterways.
Like in New Orleans, we try to reclaim the swamp. Well, there's a price to pay. There's an unintended consequence of doing so that you may not see in 5 years or 10 years, but then you may see the effect like they see in New Orleans. People say, this is a constant comment that you hear people saying, well, I survived so-and-so hurricane, how bad could it be? Well, it's not that the storms necessarily are getting any bigger, it's just that the conditions are getting, you're getting lower and lower and lower.
And as a matter of fact, under coastal Louisiana, we have a trough, kind of an upside-down mountain of 50,000 feet of sediment, most of which was deposited in shallow water and deltaic areas.
It's not just nature, it's how people have chosen to live here.
It is my belief that the primary cause of subsidence on a regional basis in South Louisiana is a natural geological process.
These two disagree on the cause for sinking, natural or man-made, but what they both agree upon is that it is sinking. That might not seem that alarming, but what happens when a sinking society meets rising sea levels?
This is a national problem, but people really haven't, they've seen Katrina and Rita and all of that, but there's a bigger issue that's coming along here, and that has to do with how we respond to changes in the natural system. Louisiana is the first place that we're really going to have to deal with global change because of the fact that we've got all of the subsidence, which is effectively a surrogate for sea level rise.
And I'm sorry to do this to you and give away the ending, but this is what we see when we finish our ride in Key West, Florida during April of 2008. Whatever your belief in climate change is, who cares? This woman's perspective should make you think. 20 years ago, Annalise Mannix, an engineer for the city of Key West, began work on a tidal valve system. This is a woman who would know if ocean levels are in fact rising because she watches how high the tides get every day in a place that has a maximum elevation of 7 feet above sea level.
And I worked on projects to put tide valves in 15 years ago on those outfalls. So I'm very much aware of it. We wanted to stop the salt water from coming up into those stormwater systems. And so I'm pretty clear on exactly how high the tide was over the past years. There's a road nearby right here that water now comes out to the center line of the road on some of our extreme high tides. It comes out into the intersection of US 1, which is a state road. State roads typically are high enough that they're not impacted at all by tides, or they shouldn't be.
In November of 2007, Mike and I saw Dr. Rowland, a Nobel laureate and professor of chemistry and earth system sciences at University California Irvine, tell a crowd of concerned citizens this.
It's gone up about a foot in the last 40 years around the world. And a foot doesn't seem like very much, but if you raised it 3 feet, a meter rise here, that's the part of Florida that would get affected by it, and the same sensitivity stretches across the southeast coast to New Orleans.
You know, if Katrina comes back to town in 20 years, it'll be much worse, because things will have deteriorated along the coast, and there's not much we can do about it, other than to build levees, tell people the truth, and just try to understand that this is a problem that cannot be fixed in one fell swoop.
Since Katrina, has the U.S. government done anything to protect the people of New Orleans? Well, jump ahead to 2010. The Army Corps of Engineers has announced it as the largest civil works project in history, the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal Surge Barrier, or the IHNC. This $14.5 billion project will reduce some of the risk to the people who live within the leveed areas of New Orleans. In the past, the Corps might have referred to this kind of project as flood protection. Today, they refer to it as risk reduction. The lake-borne barrier is one of 3 major areas of focus within the IHNC project. Also put in place at the bottom of Lake Pontchartrain is another gate construction called the Seabrook Gate. The idea with these shock absorbers, if you will, is that their purpose is to take the weight load off the levee system in case of another direct hit from a hurricane. And to address the aging levee system in many areas, the Corps plans to replace weaker, dated levees with a modern type called a T-wall that is stronger in design. Many areas will be getting concrete slurries dropped behind the levees to help keep the levees standing during a storm event. And finally, the Corps is designing a pump system underneath many leveed areas to remove water saturation near the base of the levees, which, if left unchecked, could deteriorate the integrity of the levees. It's good to see our government responding to the tragedy that was Hurricane Katrina, and it seems that this is a good move to increase public safety in New Orleans East, Metro New Orleans, the 9th Ward, and the St. Bernard Parish. But the fact still remains that this area sinks a little more every day, and sea level rises a little higher every day. Nobody's denying that, which is why I suppose the Corps is labeling this project as a risk reduction project, not a flood prevention project. The real name for the dead zone is hypoxia, which translates to low or no oxygen. The name dead zone because no air equals no life. Do you know how massive the Mississippi River is? It's a world-class river that starts up in Ohio, where it begins as a life source for so much of our country. It's 7th in size for fresh water and sediment it delivers to the world's oceans. When the fresh water from the Mississippi meets the salt water of the Gulf of Mexico, the 2 different types of water have different densities, so they don't mix well. This creates a physical structure where oxygen up top can't mix its way into the bottom of the ocean, what is largely considered the base of the food chain.
And in the summer, it gets even, the layering gets even stronger because of the heat of the sun. So there's a physical structure that has to be present before the hypoxia can form, because the oxygen from the surface normally would go to the bottom, but when you have this two-layer system, it doesn't. So that's one part of it. That's the physical part.
Dr. Rabelais told me to think of the Mississippi as literally being a vein that sustains life in our country, and unfortunately, there's some bad stuff in the blood. These are the Corn Belt states. Corn requires a lot of nitrogen fertilizers to grow plentifully and cheaply.
People who grow crops put nitrogen fertilizer on, they put phosphorus fertilizer on, they put things called potash to work on the acidity of the soil. But the phosphorus and the nitrogen stimulate the growth of the corn plants or the wheat plants or the soybeans. Even soybeans that can fix nitrogen, they're still fertilized.
The problem is that during the rainy season, all those extra nutrients in the fertilizer begin to wash into the Mississippi River. Phytoplankton eat up all the extra nutrients.
And these form the source of the food web. They're the food for the zooplankton and the larval fish, and which feeds up to the bigger fish. So the nutrients are very important for sustaining the food web in the Gulf of Mexico, but we just have too many of those nutrients now. They've tripled or doubled since the 1950s, and as they have, there's more and more phytoplankton being grown, and more of it is getting to the bottom. And when it reaches the bottom, it decomposes, and in that process, the bacteria that decompose it use oxygen just like you and I do. They need oxygen to survive, so as they're eating their little dead phytoplankton cells, they're using up oxygen. So there's a huge decrease in the oxygen, and in this two-layered system, the oxygen from the surface can't get to the bottom, so that you end up with a lower layer that's pretty much devoid of oxygen, particularly in the summertime. It's mostly a late spring, late summer phenomena. The dead zone, the area of low oxygen, has been as large as the state of Massachusetts. More normally, it's about the size of the state of New Jersey.
So why is this a threat again?
Just the basic ecology of the Gulf of Mexico. It affects the animals that live there. They have to flee, swim out of the area, which puts them more susceptible to predation and out of their suitable habitat for growth and reproduction. It affects my favorite friends, the small little worms that live in the sediments, because I've worked on them before and I know many of them very close and personally, and so I'm really worried about the worms in the sediments, but they do form the food for the fish and the shrimp. And if they get killed off, and in the fall the oxygen comes back and the fish move back in, there's not going to be any food for the fish and the shrimp. So there are a lot of indirect effects that can occur as well.
And the cause of it comes from the central part of the country, from the Corn Belt, and all of the fertilizers that are used there.
I'm always accused of accusing the farmers.
Yeah, we use nitrogen just what we need, because the plants need it, and we got them. Without nitrogen, our production goes way down. And with the rising costs, we got to get the most per acre. And we use only what we need. Our LSU Ag Center has helped us to use it, to tell us how to use it, where it benefit the farmer, and plus take care of the environment, do the least amount of harm to the environment.
A U.S. geological survey recently taken on the source of the fertilizers found out some interesting information. It's pretty much these 9 states that contribute most of the nitrogen to the Mississippi River, which drives the phytoplankton boom, and then they all die, and when they do, a bacteria forms that pulls all of the oxygen out of an area the size of Massachusetts. Corn grown upstream in the Mississippi is typically grown with nitrogen fertilizers, which is, once again, a byproduct of the petroleum industry. In 1995, a study was done that counted 195 man-made dead zones throughout the world. Today, that number is over 400.
Coasts that didn't used to have them in the 60s, 80s now have them.
So with the dead zones becoming an annual event because of excess nitrogen in the water from corn growing upstream, I have to ask Nancy this question.
Do you think ethanol is a bad choice?
Absolutely. Well, ethanol produced with corn is a very bad choice because we're increasing the marginal land that we're putting under row croppage. There's more water use. There's more nitrogen fertilizer being applied. There's more nitrogen in the Mississippi River now, this year, than there was last year, than there was the year before, because the acreage of corn has gone up substantially, which means more fertilizers.
Hold on. And that's in response to demand for?
It parallels the increase in the acreage of corn being produced. So I'm a scientist. I can't say that more corn led to higher nitrogen and led to more low oxygen, because there's no control on the experiment, but it's a very strong correlation. Okay, and I think the more data we have, the stronger the correlation is going to be. And also, if you look at the energy balance of producing ethanol from corn, it's in the red. You know, it takes more ethanol to burn per mile per gallon than it does regular gasoline. And it takes more energy to produce it than it does regular gasoline. So it's a lose-lose situation.
So there they are, erosion and the dead zone. Two reasons why public safety is threatened in coastal Louisiana. Why aren't these things being talked about? Corn-based ethanol could suffocate the life out of the Gulf of Mexico in the summertime. And guess what? The Environmental Protection Agency just flicked the green light to increase the fuel blends in our car from 10 to 15% ethanol. New Orleans is rebuilt, but how long will it be safe to live below sea level while the tide is rising? Back at home, some good friends helped spread the word that we were riding our bicycles across the country and that we'd need places to stay while we ride through Louisiana. My good friend Lori called Robert, who lives in Baton Rouge, who called David, that lives in Lake Charles, Louisiana. David knew that we wanted to see the coast of Louisiana because that would be much of our documentary focus during our time here. So on a rainy day, we drove to Cameron, Louisiana. Cameron is located just east of the point of landfall for Hurricane Rita back in 2005. Much has been repaired in 2008, but the signs of destruction were still everywhere. One thing became perfectly clear on that day. The oil industry was everywhere. And one thing was for sure. All of this machinery has to imply jobs for a lot of people. One major reality is that in coastal Louisiana, over 300,000 jobs come from the oil industry and its supporting businesses. Oh, and one last thing to think about. Jerry Schubel at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, said this well in advance of any oil spill.
We in California have said there won't be any more oil drilling off of our coast, and I applaud that as an environmentalist, but it means we're putting the burden on places like the Gulf of Mexico to provide us with the oil and gas we want to satisfy our insatiable appetites for energy.
Still, 3 years later, the largest environmental disaster in the history of the United States comes and goes, and it does little to change our perception of burning gasoline. How many of us stop to think and wonder if we ever filled our tank with gasoline that came from the Macondo well in the Gulf of Mexico? I know I did.
Have we forgotten what a challenge is? Have people given up on a challenge? What do you think? I mean, it feels really good to challenge yourself and get to the other side.
We don't want challenge. We want something that's easy.
Having said all that, Louisiana is home to some of the most genuinely kind people we met during the entire ride. When people heard what we were doing, they treated us like family. One family let us check out their Cajun restaurant, featuring authentic Cajun music, food and dance, their family crawfish farm, and crash on the floor of their old family beauty salon. We met amazing people everywhere we went in Louisiana. Before this episode wraps up, I want to introduce you to Vance Levesque, a native from New Orleans. He recognized a need for some serious reuse in a town that loves to party. You know the tradition, throw me something, mister. During Mardi Gras, these things are everywhere. It becomes a game to collect as many as you can.
Well, they have a commercial place in town that sells beads by the dozen. So we came out with this really ingenious thing where we're going to sell beads by the pound. So basically we have 30 pounds of beads for $30.
This tradition started around the 1920s, where parade crews would throw inexpensive handmade glass necklaces. Today they are almost always plastic.
The little research we did, we found out that these beads are not biodegradable, so they would end up in the landfill instead of being reused and creating the jobs that they should be creating the jobs here locally.
After hearing all this, would you believe that this is a project run by two amazing organizations, the Sierra Club and ARC, a nonprofit focused on assisting cognitively disabled young people? I was totally inspired meeting Vance because I felt like he gets it. He understands that preserving tomorrow is all about acting locally. It's a recognition that says, hey, let's have some fun, but we still look at the big picture and we use some consumer responsibilities. He's not waiting on a corporation or a government to make the change for him. He took the power into his hands and said, I want to make a difference. Which is a pretty bold thing to say in a town that's known for getting down.
It's really something to see and be a participant in, but it's a hell of a lot of fun, as everybody here in New Orleans can attest to. But there is another step, which is let's try to reuse these things and do what's right for this community.
Meeting all these people has been so amazing, and what's really starting to blow my mind is that we've made it 3/4 of the way to our destination. And except for a few field trips and breakdowns, we've made it here on 3 wheels, pulling 75 pounds of fun behind us. We've seen so much, and we've learned so much through the people we've met, and there's still so much left to enjoy on our journey across the southern tier of the United States.
Just focus in and go all the way. And what a chance it is to